marketers today when we're going to be talking about AI in marketing. We're going to be going through lots of different content, but what we really want to do is interact with you. So say hi in the chat, interact with us. Let us know if you have any questions. On the right side, if you're new to Hubelo, you'll see all the different ways you can interact with us. So send us a chat, you can send a GIF, react to each other's chat. And then you also have the polls that will be shared with you throughout the webinar. And of course, if you have any questions, you can post it in the chat or post it in the Q&A section. And so I'm really excited to bring in a variety of marketers with different backgrounds, all really well-versed in AI and marketing. And so I'm going to go ahead and bring them in. Kevin, Molly, and Nadia, welcome.
Hi, everyone.
Hello. Thanks for having us today.
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk about this topic that I know is all over everyone's LinkedIn feeds, whether they like it or not. So we're finally going to get to talk to marketers and take a deep dive into how to make AI practical. Kevin, I'll start with you. Like, what drew you to, being a guest today for this topic?
Well, to start, I think everyone watching this knows we're no strangers. Marketers are no strangers to disruption, as we've seen from 3 years ago. It allowed us to pivot and really create new go-to-market channels, as well as discover new ways that we can really talk to our customers. So I think this is no different. I think a new interesting perspective on Gen AI and looking at it from a different lens, as well as hearing what everyone else has to say, is really going to be able to fuel and bring the community closer together on different ways that they can use Gen AI practically.
Cool. Kevin, tell us a little bit about your role and where you work.
So I'm an account-based marketer over at Snowflake. I support the manufacturing industry. So I work within the manufacturing vertical of accounts. It's been really exciting because you're exposed to many different facets within manufacturing. So many sectors and vectors, from financial services down to the supply chain aspect. So you see a lot of different roles and operations. And when it comes to Gen AI and when you're looking at practicality, it really opens the field for you to think about, well, is the sky the limit in terms of talking to this persona? What can we do? And it really creates new intuitive ways to be able to talk to our customers.
Cool. We're so glad that you could join us, Kevin. Molly, I'll move on to you. And I'm sorry we didn't change your company fast enough.
You're okay. Happened quickly.
Tell us a little bit about your role and where you're at.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been running revenue operations at a various amount of companies over the last about 8 years. I like to call myself a marketer turned RevOps leader. So that's why I'm excited to be here today, because in my heart, I'll always be a marketer. As we think about AI, especially from like the RevOps practitioner lens, looking at efficiency, right? And how we build efficiencies in the right way that don't hurt experience. And so really eager to talk about that as well.
Cool. Thanks, Molly, for joining us. And Nadia, I know you're feeling under the weather, but thank you so much for joining us today. Tell us about yourself, your role, and how you might be using AI in it now.
So happy to be here. So I'm Nadia Mailani, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm VP Marketing at Proposify. So we help sales teams get visibility, control, and consistency into their proposal process. And whether you like it or not, we are seeing AI everywhere. So I think that it's a great time to figure out as a marketer or as a salesperson, how am I going to be using AI? Am I going to integrate it into my daily process? Because there are absolutely efficiencies around it. Specifically, if you're a small team, like if you have a small marketing team, AI, I really do believe will help scale and bring efficiency to your team. But we'll talk more about the details really on that a little bit later. So just happy to be here and a part of the conversation with some really great marketers. So happy to be here today.
I'm looking at who's on right now joining us. There's a wide array. There's someone, there are people from marketing, product, sales. So it'll be a really good conversation, I think, for us, and kind of pull in all the different roles that marketers interact with into the conversation. But before I get started, I want to ask, and I posted it in the chat just to kind of warm up the audience here. What's the best use for AI, even if it's not work related? Wrong answers are welcomed as well. Tell us in the chat. We want to hear from you while we get started here. So, Kevin, what is a non-work related use for AI for you? Or something maybe you wish AI could do for you?
I mean, I feel like if you're ever looking for anything or just a quick response, using generative AI is able to give it to you instantly. I mean, it's quicker than a Google search because it just gives you the answer. But it also gives you options. It provides a great foundation. Like if you're looking for a cooking recipe, it'll give you a bunch. So yeah.
Yeah, Annie Thomas just posted that in the chat. I love it. I actually not done that before. Molly, do you have one?
Yeah, I'm chuckling at Nina's dating profile, right? I feel like there's probably some really good ChatGPT profiles out there today, and maybe some AI images too. TBD. We might be
Yeah,
getting catfished in a different way.
yeah.
I
Fish in the
recently used ChatGPT to list a car, right? So write listing for selling a used car, and it was like, oh wow, this sounds 10x better than I would have ever come up with for myself, and you knew more about my car than I did. So great.
Nice. Nadia?
Yeah, I'm definitely on the meal plan. So as a busy mom with two kids, like meal planning, and I have a daughter who's celiac, so have used it for that, and it's actually did a way better job than I would have done. So I'm all for the recipes slash meal plan.
Nice. Well, I think those are all great uses. Give me some good ideas. Let's jump into, unfortunately or fortunately, AI in our work. So we'll go ahead and jump in. And I know that when we saw all the chat about AI in marketing, our LinkedIn feeds were flooded with it, some with fears and, just fears and kind of a little bit of negativity as well. So before we get into the good, let's start with the bad and just kind of get that out of the way and address all of that. So just to address some of the doubts and uncertainties associated with AI in marketing, Kevin, I'd like to start with you and ask, what are some of the common doubts you heard yourself about AI, and how did you address that, and what resources did you rely on to validate AI in your work?
Yeah, so I think some of the biggest fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and I think a lot of the people watching can relate or they hear, is job security in terms of, thinking that they'll be replaced. But I think it's really important to understand that behind every single prompt, there's someone that's initiating that command. So I feel like while job security is on top of everyone's minds, it is still important to remember that generative AI, as practical and powerful as it is, still requires human intervention to make the best decisions. Um, you know, Being able to cohesively collaborate and utilize it in many different functions with human intervention proves to be more powerful than just using it as a standalone, because it can't really make specific decisions for you, but it can give you a bunch of options. It's great at giving you a foundation. But when it comes to doing everything efficiently on its own without any human intervention, you may be asking for a little more risk than reward.
Yeah, definitely. I love that co-pilot frame. And Molly, with the RevOps lens, what fears came up with the thought of AI in your space for you or your teams?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll piggyback on Kevin specifically around, the concept of prospecting and how do we more efficiently and effectively prospect. A lot of fear around like the SDR, BDR role came up of, is the plan to replace this, right? And can we automate this? And, back to Kevin's point, it's not about replacing people. You see validation around the automation that you're ultimately running. And as you think about the experience you're trying to create for your buyers, ultimately you still need that human interaction and that human validation. So I think that that's really important. And the other piece of this is like, just because it can do something, right, it's actually good. And I think
Yeah,
that's the part that you have to remember, right? Because AI can write this great email, is it actually a good email, right? Is it good content? And that's the part that like it can't answer for you, and you have to be able to answer for yourself. So I think that that's a really important piece of this in terms of, you know, the risk that I'd call out is companies that are really overleaning into AI without the validation piece are running into those risks really heavily of, is it actually good and
Yeah, and we'll definitely get more into that later. I definitely hear that theme of like if you had a fear of AI taking over, you probably haven't really used it completely, because if you have, you'll realize that it's probably not capable of taking over, at least quite yet. Nadia, as a marketing leader, what was your main doubt with AI in marketing or for your teams, and how did you ease, you know, your team's worries? Oh, did we lose Nadia?
Unmuting. Okay, there we go. Sorry.
You're fine.
But we've seen the emails that aren't that great, right? So we know the ones that are written by people are more personalized, or the ones that are just completely written by the robot or AI. And as a VP of marketing or marketing leader, I'm always thinking about how is our brand being represented? How are things written? Does it represent our brand in a meaningful way? So even though I think that the benefits are, you know, scaling, especially with smaller teams, at this point, I think human intervention is always key, because you don't want to have that email go out where it's like, what is this? And I've received, and I'm sure a lot of people have that are listening today.
Cool. Yeah, we'll actually want to hear more from our audience here, and we want to gauge how much you've embraced AI already or haven't already. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you to complete this poll, just a quick poll of you embrace AI as a marketer, do you use it all the time, kind of. Let us know. And what do you think the responses, the majority of the responses will be?
I think it's going to be C. It might be between C and B. It's kind of I'm going to gamble between a B or a C.
Yeah, this will give us a nice gauge of how much deeper we'll dive into it based on our audience here. Kevin, how quickly did you embrace generative AI, kind of overnight or progressively? What do you?
So I approached it just like any other tech stack, right? When you're looking at the synergies of your MarTech stack, you really have to think about, well, in the tools that you currently have, how do they work together? Where's the synergies? And pretty much knowing what's possible before you even think about the art of the possible. Functional versus fundamentals. So there's a lot of trial and error. I feel like thinking of it as an extension to yourself will be more fruitful than trying to think of it as a standalone application, but rather thinking of it as how it work with your current tech stack, right? Where are the synergies for how it can amplify things? And this is when it gets interesting, because Gen AI, as everyone knows, poses quite a bit of a security risk for a lot of corporations, and but using public standalone data will also be able to yield some quite fruitful results. It just depends on how far you're able to play with it, depending on the security guidelines of your company and where you kind of stand.
Cool. Let's actually get into that. But actually, first, it looks like just about half, a little over half of our audience say they use it all the time. So we'll get into maybe more into how you can use it more efficiently during our session. All right. Thanks everyone for participating on that poll. We do have another one, so you can see the results for yourself there as well. Cool. So, we talked about, now we know that our audience, majority of them are using AI pretty consistently. But it can still be a little bit intimidating to use or get more advanced. Kevin, earlier you talked about, how you can use it more as a co-pilot. So let's actually dive more into that. Starting with Molly, as a seasoned RevOps and marketing ops leader, data hygiene and data flows are always a common theme, a priority for them. And it usually requires a lot of tedious but very important work. What are some of the best ways you've seen your peers embrace AI, and how has that impacted their efficiency?
Yeah, absolutely. So before I go into that, I think one of the big things to caveat with is like anytime you're looking at, making these adjustments or these enhancements to Kevin's point, bringing in something new to the tech stack, you got to start with, your buyer's experience and expectations and work backwards. And the same thing, occurs when you're thinking about from a data perspective and an automation perspective, right? We can automate everything, we can do everything, but is it the right are we doing the right things, right? And I think that that's a really important caveat. So when we talk about data, we've got to remember that data is the byproduct of process, right? Data is ultimately the output of our processes. So making sure we have clearly defined, clearly understood process and objectives before we start implementing, AI or additional components to automate what we're trying to achieve is really foundational. And I see a lot of companies go wrong on this, right? It's like, I can do everything, but like, am I doing the right things? It's really important. So when we think about, from kind of a user perspective, and then I'm going to talk from like an operations perspective, with our users, right? How can we make them more efficient? So when I'm talking users, I'm talking our sellers, right? So how can our sellers be more efficient and provide the best experience for our customers? Ways we can do that is we can help to automate things that are really manual on their end. Great examples of this is, we've done a demo. We're now using AI to capture the inputs from that call recording and populate CRM data the right way. Removing that step allows our sellers to focus on the right follow-up actions and the right next steps versus, the tedious work of populating data in CRM that we've now already captured. So when you're looking at it from that lens, right, we're putting our customer first, and how do we create the best experience for our customer by making sure that our sellers are working on the right actions while still capturing the information that we need to move the business forward. Then additionally, from an operations backend perspective, right, you can build great machine learning models that are looking at abnormalities in data and helping to do standardization, but you've got to have the requirements, right? And I think that's the big piece of this is understanding, what are your data policies? What's the governance model that you've created? And then how do you start to run these models? And the other big piece, they're not set it and forget it. You've got to evolve them. They've got to grow. They've got to change. They've also have to be managed. So staying on top of that.
Yeah, thanks, Molly. Yeah, speaking of, I guess, experience and customer experience, I think we're all looking and craving in this B2B marketing world as much as an authentic experience as possible with real people. Sometimes you do want to get stuff, done quickly on your own, but with, really big decisions like, obviously buying on behalf of your company, like you need someone who's real and someone who understands your pain points. And so that takes us to our next topic, which is personalization with AI. And those kind of sound like oxymorons, right? Nadia, working closely with sales leaders, how have you seen AI actually help them personalize, all the messaging and content that they're sharing with customers?
Personalization and AI sound like an oxymoron because I think at this point it really is. And let's get honest. I think it's a really great tool to start leveraging and using so you can do more with much less. So I should get my hat with doing much more with less because I have a hat back there. Because as marketers and sales and really just like a lot of SaaS organizations and really tech organizations across the board, we are really being asked and tasked with doing a lot more with less. So AI does help us get there. However, it's not perfected. And in my earlier example, we have all seen emails, content, etc., probably generated by AI where it doesn't hit. So that's where it really needs to be very much looked at and edited by your team. So I don't think we're at the stage where we can completely just like here AI do it all. In certain use cases potentially, I know there's a lot going on the SEO side of things with even analytics around AI. And I think all of that is really, really cool with SEO. And I think just being in that helps. But back to the sales and marketing thing and how it's helping, I think there's a lot of platforms that we're currently using right now to help scale up. So like Lavender's one good example of like personalized email messages. We're using Gong AI tools on some predictive consultation around like what should we do next? What's the next step based on all the data records and all the data around the conversations that are being had with our BDR teams and our sales teams. At Proposify, we're a little unique because we have our sales teams reporting into marketing. So I have a lot more visibility and influence on what we're doing and what tools we're using. But we're all game. Like I'm all game as a marketing leader to help, to use many tools as we can to help, but we need to be looking at it and just like auditing it. We're not at the point where we can just say, hey, let's just go rogue and use AI for everything. As marketers and some of our BDR teams for social selling, we're using a lot of great tools as well. Not only ChatGPT, GPT is fantastic, but we're using things like Opus for video, helping to create video content. Oasis AI is fantastic for content writing. So, perfecting your writing with zero effort is their tagline. And I think it's actually very accurate because I've used it and it's like zero effort with great writing. So a lot of tools out there, but I think we're really at the testing phase. Like, even though we had the poll and most people are using it all the time, we're using it all the time because we're trying to get a sense of, is this working for me? Is it working for my team? And how do I best leverage it? I don't know, in terms of like playbooks, we're still writing it out. Like we're still writing out the playbooks for generative AI and how we're using it for our team. So I'm excited to see what's going to happen next year. It's just going to keep evolving and it's just going to keep getting better and better.
Yeah, definitely a lot of trial and error, and I think that's the best way we can kind of educate ourselves, right, and get better with it. Yeah, again, like the common theme is, like Molly said, you can't just set it and forget it with AI. I think it's really important to have, marketing leaders, especially those with teams, managing teams, to understand like, okay, yes, you can move faster with the help of AI, but I also fully expect, like, for you to still, use your expertise. And that still takes a bit, that takes time. Like personalization takes time, right? Being thoughtful takes a little bit more time. So I think it's really important, like you pointed out, that AI is not perfected. So Kevin, knowing this, I guess, how do you compare AI with other tools in the MarTech stack, like, from a macro or micro level view in ABM of using generative AI?
So I think what's fascinating is out of every other tech stack tool, this generative AI is the only one that requires prompt engineering, which is a brand new skill set that more and more people are starting to learn and get familiar with. So macro level, ABM, the core structure is all about aligning sales and marketing, right? That was the core foundation of how it started. But the way I'm thinking of it is you can actually align cross-functionally more departments and more teams. Just think about how you can align with sales enablement, for example. They just enabled their sales team on a brand new use case. You want to be able to condense a lot of the language now to layman terms to be able to simplify it for here's the problem, here's what we're trying to solve, and you're enabling a brand new SDR that may have joined, and you want to make sure that they understand the value proposition behind what you're saying. Generative AI is able to do that. It's able to enhance that function of cohesively working with sales enablement. If you're working with product marketing, for example, let's say, for example, you have a solution that maybe has a more complex use case and you're trying to define messaging pillars for. ChatGPT and any other generative AI application is great at giving the foundation. So this is where we go back to human intervention is required because you now need to be able to look at, okay, it listed a bunch of different ways that personas that I didn't even think of in specific industries could utilize my solution and product. Which one is going to be most valuable now in terms of what's going to drive the best business value forward and also put the customer first, right? So now you are given options that you weren't even thought of before, but now you can bring that back to the table and now go like, wow, these are new personas. Do you think what's the total addressable market here for what we do here? And you start to define messaging pillars and you start to create like first call decks. And that was just some examples. And then, digital marketing. Remember, GPT is a Rolodex. It's essentially an Alexandria library's worth of just pure keywords injected in here to be able to predict what's the best next pattern for what it can say when you put in a prompt. So in knowing that, it is a keyword arsenal when you're looking at, what are some of the top ranking keywords? How can your SEO teams be able to utilize that to maximize efficiency? Because the keyword here is, if you can take, no matter what the function is, from sales enablement, product marketing, digital marketing, you can take a lot of the nuances away and be able to mitigate their time and resources and apply it to what they focus on more and reduce a lot of the manual tasks. You will be able to be a lot more efficient. And this is the true essence of being able to co-pilot. So I'd say micro is marketers. We're no strangers to evolving and developing new skill sets. I mean, you look at marketers from 20 years ago compared to now, everything's changed, right? We're like a mixture of technologists as well. And I think prompt engineering, the more generative AI grows, is going to be another arsenal of skill set that marketers are going to have in their back pocket to be able to be as concise as possible when they're putting in these prompts. So I'd say that's my view, at least, when it comes to a account-based marketing structure of being able to look at the macro versus the micro.
Thanks, Kevin. And thanks for all the great examples, Molly and Nadia, too, that you've shared. Now that you've heard a lot of different examples now and advice from our guests here, and there's no wrong answer, I'd love to hear from the audience on our next poll. Where do you look forward to incorporating or using AI now? And hopefully we've helped you kind of get some ideas. I definitely have gotten ideas from our speakers today. Let us know in the poll. How are you going to use AI moving forward? It's definitely not going to go away. And if anything, it's going to be more prevalent in our work experience and even for us as customers and buyers, right? For me, I'm definitely using it more in content development. At Hoopla, we have a fairly small marketing team, so we definitely are all developing content, especially for my team in product marketing. And then even like, for example, with our webinars, we're repurposing them using our generative AI tool that turns our webinars into snippets or blogs, whatever that is, and that way we can just move a lot faster. So that's just one example of how we're definitely incorporating AI and updating our workflows with AI. And we're not mad about it. We're not mad about that kind of taking over. It looks like from our audience, some people are saying management and personalization. Maybe we can get into more of that as we also cover the do's and don'ts. So we've heard a lot of practical ideas and examples from Kevin and Molly. Let's jump into, since we know this audience uses it pretty consistently, maybe for trial and error, we want to share with you some do's and don'ts as we start to wrap up here. Kevin, let's start with you. What are your top do's and don'ts for AI in marketing?
So I'd say first thing you really want to define is, what is your security guidelines, right, at your company? Because that is going to define exactly where your starting point is. Looking at two examples, if you were only able to use public-facing data, nothing personal, you can still get away with a lot of these different use cases that I mentioned. In fact, most of those use cases you can do with the free version of 3.5 or even a 4.0 for just ChatGPT in general when you're looking at the context. But it vastly differs when you're able to now use personal data. And being able to use personal data now turns it into a platform because there's various plugins. It's no longer just siloed into its own little trained model pre-2021. So knowing the security guidelines is definitely a do. The don't is all that you don't want to overstep onto any of the cross-functional teams that you're working with. Because remember, GPT can do a lot foundationally, but you still want to lead with their core expertise. Meaning, if product marketing has already given you a core message pillar to run with, as what it is that the company has already agreed upon, it's brand approved, you don't want to use GPT or any other form of generative AI to be able to overwrite that. Rather, you want to take the core and then be able to enhance it with what prompts you're able to use from. The other part is really you want to think about, in terms of priority, what is going to be your highest yield when utilizing GPT? And this is the time to value for efficiency. And this all goes back to not overstepping different cross-functional teams, but also it looks into how you can provide the most value without having that solution do all the work for you. And we need this equal balance that sits in between of a checks and balances to be able to determine value versus efficiency, and then where you can provide the most human intervention to co-pilot and drive the most value across all teams, at least for ABM, because it's all about aligning sales and marketing and pretty much walking in lockstep with all different divisions. I think generative AI has a massive opportunity to do it the right way, but also the moment that you don't know what the security guidelines are, it'll backfire on you drastically due to the nature that everyone knows. Generative AI has a tendency to slightly hallucinate at times. So you do want to have a checks and balance in place. You do want to have sanity checking in place, and this is where human intervention comes in.
Yes, thanks, Kevin. I love the reminder on interaction too with the cross-functional teams. I think just like you said with any MarTech, treat it like any tool in your MarTech stack, right? Where you want to be creating efficiencies across the different teams as well. And this could make it or break it. So thanks for that reminder for everyone. Nadia, tell us about your do's and don'ts.
Yeah, I think the big thing is to get out there and start trying stuff. Albeit it does ladder up to your security policy. So very good point, Kevin. But I'm all for trying it, and I think you should be too. So if you're it sounds like most of the people that have attended today are using it all the time, which is great, but using it for different use cases. I think that if you're not using it, there is some, I think you will be left behind in some cases in like 5, 6, 10 years. I think getting kind of your feet wet in it is really good practice. Because I think that in AI are abilities to do more with less. I think that's really the baseline there. Additionally, I think although you want to be able to try it, I think it's really important, and this theme has come up again and again and again in this conversation, is not to set it and forget it. Like, don't start using it and just trust that everything's done at 100%. Like, I use it all the time. I use ChatGPT to help. I have a weekly show with sales leaders. I help, GPT, or ChatGPT, can't even say it today, what helps me, write all my scripts, prepare my episodes. But I do know by using it, it's not always accurate, and I really have to go in there and edit and do things my way. So don't set and forget it. Have human intervention across all teams, and have awareness as a leader where your team is using it. Because sometimes I think, as we saw with this audience, everyone's using it a lot, but where are they using it? How are they using it? Being aware of that, communicating that back, and communicating learnings is really key.
Yeah. Yeah, knowledge share with how you're using AI, or even like maybe new tools you're using, right, across the teams can be really helpful. And then I also kind of think of like it's good also as a people manager to know what tools your teams are using so you can kind of help them with it. Because I think of, like say kids in school using generative AI, I think some of the more progressive instructors are, actually incorporating it into their learning experience. So at least they know when they're using it and kind of avoids any like problems, right? So yeah, great reminders. And Molly, what about you? What are some of your do's and don'ts?
Yeah, I think the biggest do is, make sure that you're being purposeful on how you're using it. We talked a lot about that today, right? But making sure that it's aligning with the experience, that you're looking to create, and really taking the concept of, responsible AI, which is not only looking at the experience, but the security, the cross-functional, the management, all of these topics, but just truly making sure the responsibility factor is there. I think, the other piece goes back to the experience, right? Just because it can doesn't mean it should. We've all interacted with a chatbot that's just been a horrible experience, and you just want to talk to a human, and you don't have that option, right? I just did this with an airline a week ago, and it was very frustrating, right? So how can you make sure you're not damaging the experience for your consumers and hurting your brand because you're trying to gain an efficiency on the back end? And so I think really making sure that you're aligning to the experience and working backwards, and not using it to fully replace everything. The other piece, back to Nadia's point, is, AI is learning from us as much as we're learning from it, right? So I think that it's really important that, again, you don't set it and forget it. You're learning from it, and it's learning from you. I still laugh, right? Like, AI hasn't figured out hands, right? So when you think about like images and all the memes out there, you get the goofy hand. So you've got to remember that it's not perfect. It hasn't figured everything out yet either, and isn't, the silver bullet. It's, back to Kevin's point, it's an extension. It's a co-pilot. It's an additional support resource. It's not a replacement. So really making sure that you're using that mindset going in versus, hey, this is great. It's going to be the silver bullet and all things are going to be perfect.
Thanks, Molly. Actually, we have a question from the audience here, and I'll put it on the screen. Could there be security issues with AI tools? Can you provide tips on maintaining security? I think Kevin touched upon this a little bit, and so did Nadia. Maybe you could do just a quick recap.
Yeah, I think it's important to first kind of look at what types of data are you opening to a public surface, right? If you're using something like GPT, know that this is a public-facing platform. It's not private, so you do want to run a lot of checks and balances with your security team. There's a lot of I want to say there's a lot of opportunity for us as marketers to define and work with those teams to be able to let them understand, hey, these are some things that we find valuable, and come to a middle ground and really establish what those guidelines are. I think with any new evolving technology or emerging technology, it gives us a good leverage to be able to now talk to those teams, show them our world, show the value, and come to a middle ground to define where exactly and what exactly should be, where the security guidelines are cut off, and what we could do to kind of work around that. And I think if we think back to the early days of cybersecurity, with any new technology also challenges them to think about, wow, we got new vulnerabilities, and they learn from them, right? They learn from what ends up happening, whether it is a pro or a con. We always learn from disruptors, and I think that's the key thing to remember here is marketers have as much say, because this is our domain, to be able to teach others and let them know this is what we find valuable. So while there's security risks, you're able to actually create these guidelines and make more preventions, create guardrails, so that you're able to accomplish what you need to, and also come to a happy middle ground with those teams, which is why communication is important.
Cool. Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, to piggyback on Kevin's point here, if I can, I think it's really important that you're doing the education, because it is so easy to say, like, I'm going to take this spreadsheet and I'm going to load this in Chat GPT and have it analyze something for me. It's going to be quick. It's going to show me trends. It's going to be impactful, and it's going to save me hours. But if I load something with PII in an open source platform, what did I just do? And what business risk did I just create? And I think, you have to be aware of these risks, right? And I don't think people generally think that way as they're doing these things. They're looking at the efficiency versus the risk, which is where it's really important as businesses have, their protocol and their governance around this. There's an educational component, because it is an easy thing to have happen and can be detrimental to a business.
100%. Thanks, Molly. I think those were all the questions that we got from the audience. So we just want to thank everyone for joining us. You can scan this QR code to connect with us on LinkedIn. We'll also be sharing videos from this webinar. I'll be using our generative AI tool with Hubelo to share those so I can get those to you faster. If you want to learn more about that, just feel free to learn more by clicking the link there on your screen. Kevin, Molly, Nadia, thank you so much for joining us today and dropping your knowledge with this audience. I think I definitely learned a lot from you, and I think just so many practical uses, but also a lot of caution that you've shared with the audience here. So thank you so much for sharing all of that, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone. Bye.